one of the housekeeping things we can get done, and we can either draw straws, or we need to figure this out, is someone needs to take minutes. So we have to have a minute taker. Hi.
Hey there.
How are you?
Oh, here comes a minute taker now.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you?
We're out of order, but don't worry about it. Sherry, right?
Yes.
Yes. Come sit, have a relax. We'll introduce in a second.
Hi there. Hi, Sharon. I think I've got two.
Okay, everybody is here. Let's start again. My name is Dave Stevens. I've been asked to co-chair this. This is the Reprecincting for 2010, taking into impact the 2010 census. Our goal is to redefine the map, and James will help us with that in a minute. And in that map, we're going to need to move a few people, census blocks, to different wards to be in compliance with the law. And we have to do this by mid-May, so the City Council can take the necessary votes on it. I've done by the beginning of May, so the City Council can take the necessary votes on it to submit to the state, who needs to approve it. This is for beginning. The new ward map will take an impact on January 1st. And to clear up one piece, now Wendy, jump in here in case I'm wrong. People run according to the old map.
That's correct.
And you are elected and will be sworn in into the new map, just for clarification there, so people are aware. So again, Dave Stevens, I'm also living in Ward 6.
Wendy Mazza, the city clerk.
Eneida Garcia, representing the area.
In Ward 1.
Ward 1, yeah.
Andrew Shelfo, Ward 2.
I'm Jerry Budger, Ward 3.
Marion Van Arsdale, Ward 5. Sherry Cross, Ward 4.
Richard Green, 7.
James Thomason, City of Northampton, Office of Planning and Development.
Great. I asked Wendy to do a little prep because these are public meetings, and is there anything regarding the open meeting laws that we need to make sure we're in compliance with? Some of us haven't dealt with open meeting recently.
All of our meetings are already posted ahead of time. The Reprecincting Committee, with the help of the Mayor's Office, has already scheduled our meeting notices. So we'll be in compliance. All meetings have to be posted 48 hours in advance. That excludes Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. I'm going to pass out some open meeting law guidelines, just so you have them. If you're interested, you can look at them. If you have any questions, you can always call me. I'm not going to have you sign for them because we're just an acting committee. We're not a committee that's being sworn in. So just want to pass those around. So at this point, we are in compliance for everything that we're going to be doing as far as our meetings go.
And just to fill that, the next two meetings are next Wednesday at 5,
Right.
and the following meeting at 5. And then again, we're on the cycle to be able to get this over with, and Corinne had called you all to get your background on that. James, I don't want you to get too in-depth into it, but you had other handouts you wanted to pass out as well.
Earlier, I sent around a PDF version of the Reprecincting book. I have a paper version, if you want a paper version right now. So what I'm going to do is I'll send 3 down. And
James, is that this?
Yes.
You gave you right, give me right, Dave.
Yeah,
This one?
yeah.
you may already have it.
Oh, it's just.
Some have the fancy color copy, some people have the...
This is the statement.
I got that, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I thought it was next.
There is on the back of there, take his business card, and also there's a memo on the back of that that talks about which ones are in compliance, which ones aren't. Grab that memo.
You already have it.
I have this. Is this the same thing? This is the same thing?
But I haven't attached them at the very end.
All right, so you want to take that?
Yeah. So take the attachment just so you have that, because that will be a working document that we'll need to refer to. Okay. The rules that we have to play by are outlined in the Reprecincting in Massachusetts booklet put out by Secretary Dowling, the first part of that booklet. I hope you've all had a chance to read that again. It is posted online. There'll be a quiz at 5:30. But these are the rules that we need to play by, and again, we're taking the 2000 census numbers, which come out in census blocks, and we have to make sure that each ward is in compliance with what the average is. So we take the total number of the population, we divide by 7 wards, and then we're allowed to do plus or minus 5%. The single sheet that's on the back of that handout that James just passed talks about which precincts we're going to have to focus on and which precincts that seem to be okay to begin with. But recognize this is a domino effect. Once you start move one block, it might have to slide a lot of things. And it reminds me of an old children's game when you're literally putting things out into a chess master, a checker game, and everything starts to shift. So we're going to have to pay attention to that and ask each of you to be aware of your ward and specifically changes to your ward. I was privileged to chair this 10 years ago, and the big change that happened 10 years ago that I share with you that was somewhat controversial, but it was our only choice, and we tried for a long time trying to come up with different choices. North side of Ryan Road, across the street from the school, Ward 6A and 6B had grown so much with all the developments in the 90s that when we got to the 2000 census, we had to take all of the north side of Ryan Road and move it into Ward 7 because Ward 6 was too big. And that was very difficult for a lot of folks to understand because they were literally walking across the street to vote, and now they had to go all the way up to Leeds or into the city, into Florence. So those are some of the things that we're going to have to watch out for. But again, we'll use our 2 staff experts here. And the final thing that we have for homework before we, or the prep work before we start going is, I do need someone to volunteer from basically the 6 of you to take minutes. Now, minutes for this are not verbatim transcripts. Minutes are just basically, we talked about this topic, we talked about this topic, we covered this topic. So we can either draw straws or someone needs to volunteer.
Would this be per session or?
Per session. Yeah, we could rotate it if you think that's appropriate. Anybody want to commit to this session?
I volunteer for a future session where I could bring in a computer.
Okay.
Because otherwise I print and.
Okay, I need someone for this session.
I'll do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate that, Andrew. Prefer Andrew or Andy, by the way?
Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew, for doing that. So basically, we just want to make sure that we're covering the broad points, like that there were 2 handouts. We covered the open meeting laws, and we talked about the issue that we have at hand. I'm going to turn it over to James to kind of give us an overview of our task. We don't have a lot more on tonight's agenda. I see this is a short meeting, but I want you to begin thinking about the impact that we're going to have to do. And you might want to take a drive around your ward this weekend so you physically can think of where those boundaries are and any issues that might come up. So I'm going to turn it over to James. Enjoy.
Thanks. As David mentioned, there's a set of rules that we have to follow. And the rules are laid out by the state, and they involve some things that are easily understood and others that are less understood. The thing that's easy to understand is that when we're all done, the wards and precincts have to ensure approximately equal numbers of people per ward and approximately equal numbers of people per precinct. They're allowed to fluctuate plus or minus 5%. If you look at the handout, Reprecincting in Massachusetts, it talks about the goal being to have equal representation of everybody, not voters, but everybody. And so the way that you do that is you follow a set of rules that start off with numbers, and as David mentioned, what you do is you just take the official population figure according to the federal census. That's the only set of numbers that can be used. And in Northampton's case, you would divide the 28,549 by 7 wards and come up with a figure of 4,079. In turn, each ward in Northampton is 2 precincts. So you could either divide the 28,549 by 14 and get a different number, or you could just take the ward number and divide it by 2. In addition to having a balance of numbers, there's rules that have to do with the shapes of the wards and precincts, and that's to ensure that gerrymandering doesn't occur. They're all explained in the Reprecincting book, but basically the first one is the rule of having all wards and precincts being what is known as compact and contiguous. And so essentially the contiguity is to ensure that all of the pieces that make up a ward or a precinct are in fact adjacent to each other. And the compactness is to have the smallest physical areas that can accomplish that. That actually comes in later on with another rule that it sounds very strange. It's called no long, slender fingers. It's basically you can't have a word that has the equivalent of an isthmus connecting two different parts, because it's suggestive that you're connecting one population group with another population by a long, slender finger. Our task is to assemble the wards and precincts by using these devices that are known as census blocks. A census block has nothing to do with a city block, although in a downtown area they may well be one and the same. A census block is merely a unit of geography. So the entire city of Northampton is accounted for completely. Every body of water, every piece of land, every segment of road by being encompassed by a census block, or more than one census block. So in Northampton, for this year, the 2010 census, there are 745 census blocks. 10 years ago, there were 469 census blocks. Census block is a weird constraint in the sense that it's got a definition that basically says you have to be able to find it on the ground by tracing a repeatable path of a well-defined, relatively permanent landmark. So if you think about that for a second, a roadway is a perfect dividing line between census blocks. A power transmission line, big ones, like off of Route 10 going down to East Hampton, that could be the dividing line for a census block. A body of water, either in its entirety by considering its edge, or an imaginary center line down a body of water could be the dividing line between census blocks. Collectively, we have 745 of them, and we are allowed to aggregate them to come up with the numbers of, in this case, 2,039 for precincts, or 4,079 with respect to wards, as long as you also have the compact and contiguous, no long, slender fingers. Some communities have to take into account racial disparities. Northampton does not. The distribution, I don't know why, frankly, but I just know that we've been told we do not have to take that into account. We just need to distribute people equally among the wards and among the precincts. When this process actually happens, what we will be doing is, here's a paper map that I printed right before I came down. It shows the 745 census blocks for Census 2010. And it shows the amount of population for each one of those census blocks. It also shows the current wards and precincts. Our job will be to basically think of this as a puzzle where we can rearrange the census blocks to meet the rules. In order to do that, we have at our disposal software that will allow us to do it, where basically you all will come up with a proposal, and you'll say, can we try this scenario? And I will map the individual census blocks, and as we map the individual census blocks, we will get a running tally of the total number of people that are being represented by those census blocks, and we'll also get to see the relationship between those census blocks and all of the other census blocks. We'll actually be looking at it in ward and precinct form, but as David mentioned, it's all domino effect. And so we'll see that if 500 people come into a ward from someplace, they have to leave it from someplace else.
I presume you can't put in a query for it to suggest a model?
Actually, in my experience, and I did it 10 years ago too, the The answer is no. The software isn't designed that way. The software is designed to reflect what you show it. It doesn't seem to, I'll say, have any intelligence to understand compact and contiguous especially. So it just takes whatever numbers that you assign to a particular, these census blocks go with this precinct, and it runs a tally. I'm sure with sufficient time that software package could come up to create a simulation like that. Having said that, in December, I attended a workshop in Holyoke before the numbers had been released. And the numbers have only been out on Friday. It will be 4 weeks that they've been released. The state actually undertook to do a simulation of each community within Massachusetts to get a sense of how the wards and precincts might be affected. And so what they did is they used numbers provided by the Donahue Institute at UMass, which is sort of the state repository of demographic information for the state of Massachusetts. And they made predictions for all of the 351 towns, and then they drew up their own versions. And I have that, it's titled Draft Simulation. It's with what are now the wrong numbers because they did it from a simulation, but it will give you sort of a sense of how you can add census blocks together in one place and you could come up with a totally different interpretation.
Okay. A couple questions that have arose that I just wanted to check on. We have 276 more census blocks than we did in 2010. Was that done by taking a big census block and dividing it in half, or did they rewrite all the census blocks altogether?
My understanding, again, of census blocks is that they're from areas that are relocatable on the ground according to landmarks. If you think about growth in the past 10 years, there are more roads than there were 10 years ago.
Okay.
Therefore, with more roads, it's possible to define more census blocks.
But they didn't do a complete rewrite of our census blocks.
Correct.
Okay.
In some cases, the number of the census block is essentially the same.
Okay.
So actually, even though the population declined by what, a little under 600 in 10 years?
429.
So there's got to be some pretty good shifting going on there with new developments and so forth, and that's part of the problem.
Correct.
So I have a question. How the community is going to be affected other than what you said that you could go and vote, probably like miles far away from where you were voting before? In which other ways the community is going to be affected?
It depends on who is we elect by ward a city councilor and a school person. That's the only, and they represent those wards. So that would be the only place that I would see would make a dramatic impact on, I would call Ray LaBarge versus Mary Ann LaBarge, or Jean versus Mary Ann regarding a ward issue depending on where I were to live. So if my street light was out, I had a pothole or whatever, it would depend, and it would depend on who I vote, where I would vote. And as I pointed out, the Ryan Road issue, that became as an impact.
But other than that, like I understand that representatives could be, we're going to have less representatives after the whole thing in Massachusetts, because this is not only happening in Northampton, it's happening in the whole Massachusetts.
Right, but that's above our pay grade. What happens with state representatives and state senators and our congressmen is above our pay grade and is not relevant to what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is just dividing up the 28,000 plus in the population into 14 precincts. And that will then, it will help. The reason we have to have it done by June is that the state is moving forward on their reprecincting. And in some larger communities, for instance, Boston, you have several reps representing Boston, and that would depend on how the streets would fly. So that's why Boston really needs to get theirs done. Here in Northampton, it's fairly unlikely that we would be splitting the town for our senator, we have 2 senators, or splitting our town for our representative. That's unlikely, not unheard of, unlikely that that would happen. So it really is just basically for school voting, for a city council, where you vote. It's again, not heavy lifting here. This is for...
And it'll only affect you in 2012 for the elections in 2012.
Right. All right. Any other questions that people want to?
I just had a question for James. When you're talking about census blocks, I mean, is every ward, do we have to look at every single ward, or is there specific wards that we need to look at? particularly for any increase, decrease, or whatever.
Well, with regard to that, the attachment that I made was just a quick look at 2010 versus the existing census blocks. And so it's a little bit ambiguous as to what the results actually mean, because you're comparing different years, different numbers of people, and different numbers of census blocks. So on the face of it, it might appear that wards 1 and 3 are in compliance as they are in terms of both the precinct numbers and in terms of the ward numbers. However, that was based on a total of 469 census blocks. There are now 745, and since they have a domino effect, it may be necessary to adjust Ward 1 and Ward 3 simply because something else has to get adjusted.
So basically, we're going to be looking at all 7.
That's the best way, I think, to really take it, is that everything needs to be done.
Could we have a situation where somebody runs this November and ends up in a ward that they cannot run in again?
They won't be, they will, okay, if they are elected in November, okay, let's say from Ward 3,
Yeah.
and for some reason with the redistricting, they may be shifted over to Ward 2. They're still going to represent Ward 3 until the next municipal election, and then they would have to take papers out for where they're at. Because this doesn't take effect till December 31st. That's the effective date of this.
Just a technical question. Do you have to live in the ward you represent?
No.
So,
We were like, it's basically, let's say, the same thing happened, let's say with Lucy Hartree when
Yeah.
she left, okay? She left, she represented the school committee in Ward 4. She moved to Ward 6.
Yeah.
She still represented Ward 4 because she was filling her term out.
Right.
So anybody that gets elected in November will be filling their term out till they run again in 2 years. And then that's when these re-precincting will come into play, because they won't be able to take papers out for the ward that they represented prior to if they were moved.
Okay,
That's all.
yeah, because when you talk about that, so you don't automatically, let's say,
No.
take Tacey as an example.
No.
Ward 7, come January, he's not gonna be representing Ward 3.
No.
He will stay in Ward 7
That's
until, and then if this changes,
That's right.
so if any
Clears
Ward
it
7
out.
person,
Right.
the street lights out, the potholes, not getting water
Yes.
pressure, they would be calling that representative who was elected.
that was until 2012.
Right.
Okay, great.
We had a lot of discussion on this because it's the election season, so people were very concerned as far as taking out nomination papers and what was going to happen with the re-precincting. And so, you have to tell them that, this doesn't take effect till December 31st, so it doesn't affect this particular election.
Other questions that people might have been thinking about as we've been going forward with this?
I have a question, because I want to make sure I'm interpreting the difference between a ward and a precinct. Because one of the rules is that no precinct shall contain more than 4,000 residents. So the precincts are a smaller units.
Subset.
Yeah, of the ward. And the blocks are the smallest units
Correct.
within the precinct.
Correct. So we build from the blocks to create the precincts, to create the ward, to create the city. And all of them have to be within plus or minus 5% of the 479 for the ward and the 2039 for the precinct. So basically 2040 and 4080. We have to be basically within 5% of that to be in compliant with the laws. No fingers, okay, and they have to be compact. And those are sort of the big rules that we need to be conscious of.
And wasn't that an issue in 2000 that you had some fingers there that were causing problems?
There were people who were advocating for fingers, and we kept resisting it, so we stayed away from it in the long run. And again, one of the things we try to stay away from too is, the people hear about re-precincting, redistricting, all that, and they think of the gerrymandering, and that's sort of over our heads here. We're all one city here. We basically want to make this as easy as possible. We have a short timeline to get this through. I would suggest that we just do it as what the logical way is. My suggestion for a meeting is that we'll conclude this in not much longer, unless you have a lot of questions, that we come back in next meeting that might last longer than an hour and a half, so try to book out a little bit of time. And we start playing with, okay, move that block, move this block, and we're gonna be over in City Hall, and James will have his computer, and we can start doing that. You'll have a preliminary draft plan for us?
I could.
You could, and we'll talk about what next steps we'd like to see James do. But, you know, we could be able to do that, and then start saying, okay, on this, which again is not, this is not engraved in stone, this has to be changed again because of, again, the number of blocks will change this. But for the most part, the quick read of this is 4 has too many people, 2 has too few people. Okay? Fortunately, they're right next to each other, so there might be a couple of blocks that you can move from 4 into 2. Don't know that for sure. We won't know until next week. But that's why being acquainted with your current ward map and walking around or driving around and saying, okay, that's where my boundary is. So you're aware. So when we get to the point, and again, next week, I assume we'll start moving around. Hopefully by the end of that meeting, we have a plan. If not, we're going to have another meeting. We're going to build in another meeting in a short week. But hopefully by the end of that, we'll be able to agree to a plan. Then the third meeting that I had scheduled, I would like to open it up for public comment and have people, and we will have public comment in all the sessions actually, but have people actually talk about it, because there will be some people who might be concerned about some of the recommendations we're making, and we'll need the press and the mayor's office to help publicize what our decisions are. And then we would listen to what they say, come back, and then have a vote on it. And if we're ready to put a final vote forward on it, then we move it forward to the city council, and we actually have a 2-week extra city council meeting in there because they've got to vote, take a break, vote on it again. But we have a third meeting in there just in case there's a headache here. But that's our timeline. We don't have much more time than that. So we really do have to, we can't fool around here. We really need to keep the process moving fairly quickly because we have to meet the state deadline. Or the state will take over and do it themselves.
And build a city.
And build a city.
And build a city.
So we are, one, trying to save the money, and 2, we're trying not to let Boston decide how we, where we vote, who we vote for.
But I think if James is able to kind of do a rough draft kind of for our next meeting, I think it's going to help all of us kind of, right now it's kind of like up in the air for all of us because we really don't have anything to really visually look at. So I think that if we're able to have some sort of draft from you to kind of move things around, I think it's going to be much better for the next meeting where we're going to be able to see what's actually happening and what we really need to do.
Because, I don't know about you, but I can't read this, the one that was on the
No,
website.
they didn't understand the thing, they didn't understand
It's
it
like,
at all.
okay, I think that says 30,
Okay, well, I'm glad
you know, it's in that block.
When you say public, sorry.
I just wanted to clarify, so are these numbers accurate, but we don't know how many blocks it is, or is it for, I'm talking about the precinct
the
and ward
one-pager,
numbers.
yeah.
Are the numbers accurate, but we don't know how many blocks it represents, or?
Those numbers are based on the 2010 census, so collectively, if you added them up, they would be 28,549.
Right.
And all that's showing again is if you distributed those numbers over the existing wards and precincts, which ones would be in and out of compliance.
Okay.
So the numbers are accurate, but you have to realize that you're comparing it with something that no longer exists in essence. The 469 is now the 745.
I see.
When you say public comment, you mean us, not, or do you mean this open to the public to come
I
and make
think
comments
that,
also?
I think that we should allow at each meeting that ability for people to say if they come to the floor and have anything to say, especially next meeting. I think there'll be people who might want to, you know, give input, and the most importantly, the third meeting, when I really do want people to say, to have the chance, because I don't want this derailed. If we're making a dumb mistake, you know, which we could make, we need to clean it up before it gets to city council, or we need to be able to answer the public like the people on the north side of Ryan Road. I was the Ward 6 person at that point in time, and I said, I'm sorry, here's the map. You find me another 150 people that I can move from here to here, and easier, I'll do it. But right now, there's nothing else I can do. This is the only, and Mary Ann looked at it, Richie came in and looked at it, and we all ended up agreeing this was the only choice. Lousy choice, but it was our only choice.
And the voters hate it. I mean, those particular voters absolutely hate it. I hear it every election.
For sure, here,
Yeah.
people on one side of Spring Street, and, yeah.
Yeah,
And that's just something we then will have to live with, whatever our recommendation is to the city council. But we wanted to, again, make the process as smooth as possible to anticipate. And, you know, we welcome the public being able to say, hey, you know, can you rethink this for us? And that's why I sort of envisioned the 3. That middle meeting, though, could be long. We could be here for 2 or 3 hours, and I think you need to block that into your timelines, because even though the computer's fast, we have a few little headaches that we have to take care of. James, anything else you feel we need to share at this point in time?
A common question that comes up with regard to what constitutes census blocks and how arrangements can be made to accommodate them. Census blocks, in all likelihood, would not be the fence between your backyard and your neighbor's backyard, because a fence or a hedge or something like that is not considered to be very permanent at all. So that's where you can come up with situations where, again, the neighbor on one side of you is in one ward, one precinct, and the neighbor across the street is in a totally different one. So just be aware of that, that it has to be a real honest-to-goodness, long-term or essentially permanent physical boundary, body of water, road, power line, railroad tracks.
And we have no ability to recreate the census blocks. They've already been established, and we have to use those blocks, correct?
Correct.
We're just changing the lines if necessary.
Right. We can't alter the block. We have to play by the rule. The rule is, here's a block. This block has got 35 people in it. This block's got 15. We have to make this work. Okay. One of the examples from 10 years ago, and I was sharing this with a few before you all were here. Ray was on the committee. Ray and Mary Ann sat on the committee with us, and we had they were trying to describe this block that was going to define where Ward 7 and Ward 6 were at that point in time. Both of them were elected from each of those wards. And Ray goes, oh, there's a bridge there. And it was on Sylvester Road. And I'm like, there's no bridge on Sylvester Road. Of course, I'm arguing with Ray LaBarge, the mayor of Leeds. But, it was, I don't remember a bridge. I've been up and down Sylvester Road all my life. I don't remember a bridge. So I'm in the car driving up there, and there's a little tiny bridge, no bigger than this desk, but there's a bridge. And that helped define the census block. But that is a permanent thing on Sylvester Road, because it's a bridge that we maintain, basically a culvert if you really want to know. But it is a bridge, and that is part of how that census block was defined. But again, my wooden fence in the backyard is not going to be part of what's allowable. And it's what is allowable is what the state has determined, actually the federal government has determined as these are the blocks. And we've got 745 of them to play with, and they have to end up being divided. The blocks don't have to be divided equally. The population within those blocks, the totals have to be.
And if I read this correctly, some of the blocks don't have any people in the wall.
Correct.
Correct. Correct. The pond at Smith College.
And you can use the fact that they have zero population to help you with regard to the compact and contiguous, because you can change the shapes of your overall precinct, but you're not affecting the population at all.
I just want to ask again the question about Bradford Street, my 7 friends. I had a call from some couple people on Bradford Street. It's a block of 7 people who were in Ward 3 until 2000, moved to Ward 1, really want to come back. So should I ask them to all sign a letter to that effect? Or that, would you recommend it? Would that help?
I think, again, you're representing the interests of the wards, the way the mayor set this up. And if you have a specific interest from constituents in your ward, you need to bring it forward. My pushback on that only would be, are you sure that all 7? Because I don't want to say sure and then have the public comment people and 4 show up here saying, no way in hell do I want that to happen. So the evidence you would to bring in, which were to say, yes, here are the 7 people living in the street and all 7 want to move back over to the ward, may or may not be, I'm not projecting, may or may not be compelling to the members who vote on this committee to make that happen, given compact, no fingers. So again, we have to play within those rules. They're the overriding rules. Personal requests from constituents in our wards can be a factor. Okay.
Can I ask a question about, I found this PDF helpful, but there are no streets on it. Is it possible to get streets?
Which one?
This is the one that you sent out, the 2010 population versus 2,000 blocks.
I think that I have a replacement that's already, are you getting this from the website?
This was you emailed the PDF last week.
Then I have a newer one that I believe is on the web that does in fact have the streets are, it doesn't have the equipment on.
And then I had a question about 7A, and if I'm looking at old data, but it looks like there's a finger in there. You know, there's a little kind of.
Yep. Yep, and I forgot why we were allowed that too, because that was brought up. I think it is, help me out here, Red. Can you
Oh, I see the little jut over
you
here.
saw it, yeah, okay. I don't know what that is, if that's going up, something street, is it Water Street?
No, I think it's
River?
Reservoir Road.
Oh, Reservoir Road,
I believe
okay.
it's Reservoir Road.
Okay. So,
Right, because even Chesterfield Road is listed as, believe it or not, when they get their mail, they get it as Florence, as 01062, and they're about as far away out in Leeds as possible, yeah, I think that's what that is.
okay. And then for whatever reason, that was created. And I'm not sure, again, you'd have to drive it, you'd have to get in your car and drive it to find out why that was there. It might have just been because of the census block that we had to include that was oddly shaped. Some of the census blocks were oddly shaped, not so much anymore. One of the reasons we got more census blocks was to reduce the odd shapes, and also because of the new streets that have been developed. But that's everybody's homework, is to drive out there and find out what that is. Red, I want to report next time.
Yes, sir. Well, it's in 7B, so that's
Yeah.
not a bad thing, it's just. Yeah, would that be considered a finger? Maybe that's why, because it's the precinct, right? It's 7A, 7B. It doesn't go into any other ward.
Yeah, but the finger rule, I think, also depends more on dividing between wards. I could be wrong. Precincts is not going to make too much of a difference.
I wouldn't think so, but again, I don't know about it. Once we do this gets submitted to an independent third-party group for review, as it was 10 years ago, and I think they will make the final call based on looking at what's been proposed.
All right. Other issues or questions that people have? Other business that people want to accomplish today? Okay, next time, James, we'll be upstairs, we'll have a computer. What would your recommendation to this group be, since this is your second time through this?
What I would do is I would take the existing wards and precincts, because people are interested in seeing if in fact 1 and 3 might require very little change, and I would drop all of the 2010 census blocks on them, and we would just play with those directly. So you could see, you can answer your questions immediately with respect to not 1 and 3, but to the things that surround 1 and 3, because those are the ones that would influence 1 and 3, and in turn be influenced by 1 and 3. So I would just take the 2010 figures, put them on the existing wards and precincts, and use that as starting point.
Could you send that to us as soon as you got that ready, before that meeting, or we have to wait until that meeting?
I can send it as soon as I can do it. It may not be terribly legible if you ever printed it, unless you printed it on an extremely large piece of paper. If you have everything in electronic form, as I say, the software does all the tallying for you, and some census blocks are extremely small, and some are extremely large. And so to try to accommodate on a piece of paper, something that would also include, say, the number of people, so you'd have to have a label that would say how many people, it becomes very difficult to balance the size of the print on the paper. I can do it in electronic form. In fact, on the web for the city, there are 3 maps that I've published, 2 of which you could zoom in to your heart's content, but as soon as you do, you'll notice that things start getting very cluttered. So the best way is really to see it right then and there in front of you, and we'll have access to a video projector so we can see it quite large.
Or the reason I'm asking for this is that because the person who I'm going to be working with, she is a resident in Hampshire Heights. She never has had any experience about this. This is a new vocabulary. Everything is new for her. She represents that community because, you know, she understands how important it is for her, for the community. she has a little, she has had a little opportunity to share in groups like this. I think that it's going to help her to sit with me and go over that information before she comes to the meeting to be, prepared. And I think that without that, it's going to be very hard for her to really participate. And I think that it's important her participation.
Okay. Can we accommodate by that by having that map, which you're going to be creating, correct? Can we have a map that size with a new configuration on it ahead of time available?
Well, then that would be contrary to what I just said,
Okay.
about having an existing ward, dropping it on the existing wards and precincts. What we have here, I mean, you're welcome to take this if you want right now. Here are the existing wards and precincts with the 2010 census figures. And so you could see where 1 and 3 do comply, but you'd have to add up all of the individual values.
Gotcha.
So the answer is, I can make you whatever you want. Unfortunately, it's really constrained to paper. When you do it in electronic form, it's literally, you click on this one and it will tell you 3 people are coming out of the unrepresented group and it's going into a represented group. And it shows you the tally right then and there. That's very difficult. I'm not saying it would be impossible to do, but because there's 745 units, you'd have to say, within my existing ward and precinct, how many of those units do I have to add together?
Please. I don't think we've got this resolved yet, so let's just hold on to that. We need to figure out something along this line. Jumping over here, please.
Well, I just want to make sure that we, let's see, is it an assumption that, or I would like to confirm the assumption that it's better to change as few things as possible?
Correct. I think that's...
So this is not a zero-based.
No, I don't think we start all over again and all of a sudden Ward 4 becomes Leeds.
Right. It's not that it's totally new and improved, it's just,
We're tinkering around the edges.
Yeah.
I think that's the easiest way to go in the short timeline we have.
Yeah.
I think it's also the fairest way to go because I think it's disruptive when we start playing beyond that. There are other agendas come in, and I think we're just really trying to balance 7. 1-7. That's what we're trying to come in to. I want to just recognize Adam, if everybody doesn't know Adam Cohen from Ward 3, our videographer.
I was wondering, I know it would be really helpful to me and maybe to the public in general, if you could, James, perhaps have a series of just simple graphic snapshots of the zones that actually might change, shift from one ward to another. So if there's like 10 such zones, it'd be 10 JPEGs, a simple graphic format. I could make a little PDF out of it. You could give it to the public.
The problem with that, Adam, I get that,
Mm-hmm.
because then we could all focus on that. But it's a domino effect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that happens is that if you say yes to this, then all this changes. Everything, for instance, if we were to move some of 4 into 2, do we then have too many in 2 and we have to move some into 5? And we have to move some into 3 and move some into 1. So you start making assumptions, but if you don't agree to assumption 1 or assumption 2, you go down the wrong path. So if the more we get published of wrong paths out there, people will start thinking, oh, well, I'm now moving into Ward 3, when in fact that was only on paper, not in a reality. So I would resist going down, getting too far into it at this stage. Next meeting, yes. I think next meeting, after next meeting, publishing those maps, getting those, showing where that lines were to change, I think would be the appropriate time. Right now, it's just speculation.
Okay.
Would it be possible, I request a copy of that size, is that possible?
Sure. This is the largest size that we could print.
That
This was provided by the state.
would be terrific, I really.
And it takes how long just to print those out, just to make sure? 10 minutes?
15 minutes.
Okay, so
I'd like one too, if I could.
I think everybody's going to want one.
Yeah.
Now, why don't we put it this way, that James will start printing those out. They'll be available in his office between now and the next meeting if you want to stop up and pick them up. Is that doable?
Sure. Let me just ask an additional question. Do you want one overall one, or would you like one for the ward that you're representing, or would you like one of each?
I would like one of each.
Okay, so,
No, only the word that I represent. But with, this would be an ideal situation. I mean, given the fact that it is a domino effect, it would be terrific to see the whole pattern. And then, just for clarity, well, I'll tell you what, I have
Yeah,
Even
you should
how-
see it.
I wouldn't want you to print more than that.
So the heavy lines are the existing ward lines,
Yeah.
precinct lines. The small outlined greenish lines
Yeah.
are the various census blocks, and the number refers to the number of people in the census block.
Thank you. For me, this copy alone would be sufficient.
Yeah, that's a great tool right there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say that's fine.
And should you want, this is published at the City of Northampton website in PDF form. If you're not familiar with PDF, PDF has a lot of tools. You can actually zoom in if you want to see something that you can't necessarily see easily, even in paper form.
Some of us are just tactile and want to be able to touch things as opposed to my little tiny, my little laptop screen isn't that big.
Yeah, I do too.
So, would that help with the issue if you would get a copy of that at that time? and be able to go over
Yeah,
it?
it's going to.
Great.
And one of the things is, James, would you be available to have a conversation with, I think it's sneezing, sorry. Sorry about that. With Elba to go over that in case you had questions, or with any of us to have questions. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if Elba takes a look at that and feels she needs a further explanation between now and next Wednesday, she could schedule an appointment and have sit down with James and kind of just go over what she might have missed today.
Okay.
Other issues that people want to talk about. So what I'm hearing is that James is going to take the existing wards lines. He's going to plug in the 210 census data. That does result in this, correct? Okay. So we're starting from that point,
Right.
which basically says to me when I look at this, that we have a little bit too many people in 4 and not enough
Right.
people in 2. All right? We have a few other places we have to do some tinkering as well. A couple of blocks have to move in a few other wards. For instance, when I looked at this, I saw that 6B, we might move a few people over to 6A to balance it out a little bit. But that's the kind of thing that we'll have to take a look at when we move forward. Does that make sense to people? We're all on the same page. We know what our homework is going to be. Between now and next Wednesday, you can come and pick up one of those maps.
You're on the second floor, right?
Second floor. And you can go through it. If you need a quick primer on that, James can be able to do that for you. James works a 9 to 5 day. Okay, so if you want to actually schedule time with him, I would call ahead of time because he has other responsibilities to the city. Other issues that people want to bring up. I'm not one for meeting to meet's sake. If there is nothing else, I would call for a moment to adjourn.
So moved.
You got easy minutes today.
Yeah.
Sometimes you
Smart.
can keep track.
Yeah.
Thank you. Andrew, now who would the minutes go to, you or to me? Yeah.
You can send- Yeah, it doesn't matter, you can send them to me if he wants to.
Okay.
That's fine.
Andrew, do you have it? Okay. Send them off to Wendy just to capture this meeting. And Adam's video, I'm sure, will always be available. Thank you, Adam. Any other, I just want to open it up to the public. Adam, you're it. Any other questions or comments you want to bring forward at this time?
Good to go.
Okay, good. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Enjoy, and we will see you next Wednesday at 5 o'clock. Plan sort of 5 to 8, because again, I'd rather get it all done in one meeting than have us to have to schedule meetings.
Especially if you get cooking.
If we get cooking, let's just, you know.
James, you should have those maps starting Friday.
You know, paper ones like this.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to start printing them right now.
Oh,
I mean, each one takes about 15 minutes and initially has to set up in the printer, so that might take another half an hour. But by tomorrow, I'll have them.
Oh, if you're not in the office, then somebody
They're
will
right
be
in
there.
front, they'll be right, we have an area right near the reception desk
Okay.
for picking up.
so if you could then just put everybody's name on one copy, obviously, Ward 1 we already have, but if you could make 6 more copies, we'd be in good shape.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for playing. Look forward to seeing you soon.